So I was having a conversation with my boyfriend the other day that almost ended our relationship. Why, you ask? Well, I said Terminator 2 is objectively one of the greatest films ever made. To which my boyfriend, who previously had been the love of my life, said, how could anybody not like Terminator 2? It's like quite literally one of the greatest action movies ever made. So he asked me, well, why do you like it? Hello? It's all about this narrow-minded badass.
Negative. It's not a mission priority.
Who doesn't feel pain, doesn't express emotions.
See, you're getting it.
No problemo.
Has extreme logical black and white thinking.
Let me go! Why the hell did you do that?
Because you told me to.
As he learns how to be human. Oh, it's autism. Yeah, I like it because it's autism. And that, in and of itself, that's kind of a problem with media. But before we go any further, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Rebecca or Ricky Faith Quinn. I'm an autism advocate and crisis counselor for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. I make videos about disability representation and feminism in media. But don't worry, even though that sounds super smart, I am, in fact, an autistic bimbo. So if the bimboification of autism and feminism is your vibe, be sure to check out our Patreon, linked down below, or our YouTube memberships. Or if you're like me, who's clinically diagnosed as a broke bitch, subscribing to the YouTube channel is free. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button because it hasn't been fed in weeks. He is hungry and must be fed. This video is going to be just a little bit different from my other deep dives because one, I'm working on several deep dives at the moment for upcoming content in the next few months, including videos about the many controversies of Chris Chan, a look back on how Gamergate elected Donald Trump, and a deep dive into the horrendous mistakes of Autism Speaks. These deep dives are taking a lot of time and energy, but I didn't want to leave you guys without content, so instead we're going to be doing these little mini deep dives where we talk about things happening in the disability and feminist community right now. Why? Because I'm a yapper with a camera and a microphone and I just quit my day job.
I need a vacation.
I have nothing but time on my hands, and thus let the yapping begin. So when I say that Terminator 2 is autism, what do I mean? Am I literally saying that the story of trying to stop the machines from taking over is about autism? No, of course not, nor am I literally saying that the T-1000 is autistic. When I say that Terminator 2 is about autism, what I'm talking about is autism coding in media. And if you're familiar with our channel, you may remember this concept from previous videos where we delve into specific characters who are coded as autistic and why. But if you're not familiar with our channel, or you just don't remember those videos, since Lord knows I don't after all of that tequila. Oh, I am puking tonight. Need to re-examine the way I make life choices. Ooh. Here's a quick rundown of what coding in media means. Coding in media refers to attributing specific characteristics or traits as shorthands for specific identities in fictional media without actually having to state what those identities are. Intentional coding in media became prevalent during the implementation of the Hays Code from 1934 to 1968, which prohibited explicit depictions of homosexuality in film. So in order to get around this censorship, filmmakers would display queer characters through subtext only, laying the groundwork for a practice that would continue long after the Hays Code was gone and all the way into present-day media. Some examples of queer coding during the Hays era include films like Laura, with the character of Waldo Lydecker being portrayed as effeminate, sharp-toothed, and is clearly very gay.
My love for Laura was not merely a man's desire for a pretty young girl. I was a cold and egocentric man who amused himself by showering a naive child with treats and trinkets.
Or another being the relationship between Plato and Jim in Rebel Without a Cause. Plato's attachment to Jim is coded as a same-sex crush.
It's warm. Here, my jacket. It's warm. Can I keep it?
And famously, Some Like It Hot, which is attributed to killing the Hays Code, a film starring Marilyn Monroe where two men dress up in drag in order to hide from people attempting to kill them.
That's good. I'm gonna level with you. We can't get married at all. Why not? I'm a man. Well, nobody's perfect.
A prime example of modern coding is shown through Disney villains, who are queer-coded through their flamboyant mannerisms.
This one is different. He's honest and he's sweet.
Please.
He would never do anything to hurt me.
He's a guy.
Gender non-conforming appearances, Or like in the case of Ursula and the Little Mermaid, a literal drag show based off of the drag queen Divine, where she even uses eels as the replacement for feather boas. Coding is shorthand, a quick visual and subtextual way to get across a feeling to its audience. With the case of Disney, though, the queer coding is overall harmful. I don't think they're using it as a way of saying, these villains are bad because being gay is bad. They're using it as shorthand to give off a sense of othering or cultural defiance that is often associated with the queer community. Coding doesn't just stop at queer coding, though. It can also extend to things like racial coding, most commonly found within games like Skyrim, where the fictional creatures of the Khajiit are racial coded for Romani, with their very distinctly Romani-sounding accents.
Khajiit has wares, if you have coin.
And also the bigoted belief of them being nothing but thieves.
They look upon us and see only thieves and smugglers.
Or there's racial coding in books, like in Lord of the Rings, where dwarves are racial coding for Jewish people, as shown through the dwarves being a diasporic people who are trying to return to their ancient homeland, and also the similarities between Dwarvish and Hebrew. The native language of us Jews. And there's also racial coding in films like Bright, which is coded for a bad movie. Also, if you want a full deep dive as to why Bright is bad, please check out Lindsay Ellis's video on it.
I said, who's this? He said, I'm Fort Cop, and I'm your new partner. That made my heart stop.
It is absolutely fantastic. Coding in media is not necessarily something that is bad or good. It's more of a neutral concept. But there are problematic aspects to coding, like when it comes to neurodivergent coding in science fiction and fantasy, where neurodivergent coding is often found in creatures like aliens, androids, or robots. Yes, there is a difference apparently between androids and robots. I did not know that, because I'm a bimbo. One of the most common tropes within science fiction is the trope of an alien or robot learning what it means to be human. We saw it in films like 1999's Bicentennial Man, starring Robin Williams as Andrew, the robot who goes on a 200-year-long journey in order to become human.
I've actually gotten to a point where I can pretty much exactly replicate the external physical appearance of a human being.
Or we saw it in shows like Star Trek with their portrayal of Spock, the alien from planet Vulcan.
How do you feel?
I do not understand the question.
Who throughout the show learns to accept his more emotional and illogical human side.
Do you have a message for your mother?
Tell her I feel fine. Live long and prosper, Father.
Or we even saw it in more recent films like Big Hero 6, where Baymax spends much of the film learning what it means to be human through his love of the main character, Hiro. Okay, so we've listed the examples, but where's the problematic? Well, the problem is, as stated in overly sarcastic productions, video, trope talk, robots. The issue with the robots is the line between what the writers define as human versus alien or robotic. When these characters start off their journey through the film as complete aliens or complete robots, they're typically depicted, as I mentioned before, emotionless, narrow-focused, and having difficulty with concepts like empathy or processing other people's emotions.
Why do you cry?
You mean people?
Yeah.
I don't know. We just cry.
These are all extremely well-documented traits of autism. These are not all the traits of autism spectrum disorder. You can struggle with all of these things and not be autistic, but they are most commonly associated with autism. And these are the things that filmmakers are choosing to use as shorthand to describe these characters as inhuman, thus using autism as an example for what it means to not be human.
I know now why you cry. But it's something I can never do.
Similarly to how queer coding villains leads to unconscious biases against homosexuality, autism coding of aliens and robots is equally, as the Youngs say, a problematic. Now, none of this means that all of the movies depicted are bad. I love most of these movies. The discussion of what it means to be human is one of the most popular and widely discussed philosophical questions told throughout all media. From the beginning of storytelling, like Enkidu in the Epic of Gilgamesh, to stories of golems in Jewish folklore, or arguably the first two iterations of the robots learning to be humans trope, 1883's Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, or 1818's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
The bad part of this trope is not really in questioning what it means to be human, but rather in their definitions of what it means to be inhuman. Because when you label all of these traits as inherently inhuman, it unintentionally includes and thus alienates all real humans who do fit in that category. Notice I said unintentionally here. I am not condemning anyone here to be smited off the earth by my Jewish space laser. Plus, they took my keys to it away after I kept trying to fire it at Elon Musk. So how do we fix the trope? What is the solution here? Well, honestly, there kind of isn't one.
What? What the
Cue the angry commenters. Then why are you complaining on the internet if you don't have a solution? And to that I say, I literally said in the beginning of this video that I am just a yapper. I never said I had a solution for the problem. And the reason there isn't really a solution to the problem is because while coding is there and it's not great, the thing is, robots and aliens are always going to be coded as something in media. Whether it's neurodivergent coding like in the movie Home, which is just, oops, all autism, even down to starring Sheldon Cooper as the alien.
How many mistakes do you have?
62. Bazinga.
Or racial coding like the aliens in District 9, which are problematic in their own right for their depictions of Nigerians. Coding is just how the brain works. We have this subconscious need to categorize and organize everything into little boxes in our heads. So when we do consume media, we're gonna try and pick it apart to fit it in those tiny boxes. And even when we as creators of media try to make something new, we are always going to lean back into our own unconscious biases while doing so. So like the more important thing here is not to just entirely stop coding, but rather pay attention to what your coding says about the people you're describing, and the very real impact it could have on people who match that. A good example of this, as I mentioned before, dwarves in Lord of the Rings are Jewish coded. And as folklore, dwarves were often associated with negative Jewish stereotypes. These were all things that informed Tolkien as he created what has now become the most globally accepted image of dwarves with Lord of the Rings. Though Tolkien was not intentionally making a one-to-one allegory for Jewish people, as Tolkien was a famous hater of allegory, he was also aware of the influences he was taking from Jewish people and the effects it might possibly have on us as a whole. When addressing the similarities and inspiration, Tolkien even stated how he admired aspects of Jewish culture and history and sought those out as inspiration to create a more positive interpretation of dwarves. Though Tolkien's dwarves are Jewish coded, they are not anti-Semitic, because the author saw and acknowledged that this coding would have an impact, especially given that the 1930s was not a great time to be Jewish. And that's what creators and consumers of media alike need to understand. Not all tropes and coding in media are inherently problematic. In fact, again, many of them are completely neutral. It's the implementation of these tropes and this coding that make or break the problem. So remember, kids, just because robots aren't human does not mean we need to make autistic people feel that way too. Because we are. We are human too. I mean, other autistic people are. According to the anti-Semites, I'm actually a lizard in human skin. Hello there, if you made it this far in the video, it's time for our Patreon shoutout! Today's Patreon shoutout is Charlotte P. Huckster, who is one of the newest members of our Patreon. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for being a part of the Bonbons, and your incoming message really just almost brought me to tears. It made me feel so good to hear that my work could have an impact on your life, because the feeling is honestly mutual. I could not do the work that I do without the support of my Patreon subscribers, my Instagram subscribers, basically all of you who just support me either monetarily or just by watching. I could not do this without you. If you would like to be considered in our next Patreon shoutout, be sure to check out our Patreon via the link down below. Until then, I look forward to seeing you guys in our next video. Bye!